This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Okay.
Woman here, back again to answer the number one question that I get asked all the time. Why will the mainstream media not report on Iran, the uprisings, the protests, the demonstrations against the regime? There's actually a very simple and clear answer, and you're going to understand it like that once I put it into a conceptual framework for you to make sense of. Here's the tough pill to swallow. The reason that the mainstream media will not report on Iran is because the Islamic regime is their ally. Okay, their ally in what? Their ally in the war on the West. The war on the West was originally fought by the communists against the West. Now the baton has been passed to the Islamists. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Islamists are not alone in their war on the West. They're actually working with their allies who are internal. Okay, so the Western left are their allies. But it's not just the Western left anymore. There's now been a fusion between the woke left and the woke right. They've made a super pact, right? They are now the super woke. So the Islamists are in an alliance with the super woke to destroy the Western world. Now you have the foundations. Let's talk about the role of mainstream media. Mainstream media, okay, their responsibility in this war is to manage your perception, how you see the world. How you see the world is shaped by what you are exposed to. Therefore, the mainstream media is curating an alternative universe where you see exactly what they want you to see in accordance with this story that they're creating. What is that story? The story is that the West is the source of all evil and the jihadists are actually just oppressed freedom fighters. So what happens? Let's put our thinking caps on here. What happens when the media exposes the truth of what is happening in Iran? What's happening in Afghanistan? What's happening in Yemen? What's happening in Sudan? What's happening in the Congo? What's happening in Nigeria? What's happening in Lebanon? What is happening in Gaza under Hamas? What happens is that very carefully constructed illusion that they've been training your perception through collapses like a house of cards. The reason they cannot tell you what's going on in Iran is because it exposes their ally in the war on the West. The media is not here to offer you truth. The media is here to manage your perception. And it does that by exposing you only to heavily manipulated information that supports their narrative.
And that, of course, is an Iranian blogger that we opened up the show with. And she's very outspoken, talking about, in fact, there was some late breaking news. We were going to run with it, but there's just not enough sources reporting it. And the news that was coming across, and this was coming from not her, but another Iranian dissident, if you will, saying that the Ayatollah Khomeini has fled Iran for Russia. And of course, there's a lot of news sources that are reporting that they feel that that's close to happening. But as of right now, as you all are tuning into the program right now, there's no other news sources that are reporting this. But it is an interesting time that we find ourselves living in. This, of course, is the Tom and Bob show. We so appreciate you joining us here on Kentucky's Voice, where we do cut through the noise and expose the narrative and bring you the truth. The mainstream media absolutely refuses to tell you. If you'd like to join in today's program, you can do so by texting us at 502-571-0970. My guest, we are trying to get a national guest in, Bill D'Agostino with the Media Research Council in Washington, D.C. We've been having some technical problems, but if not, you're stuck with Tom Fallbush and myself. So please stay tuned. We are going to be right back with more of Kentucky's Voice. This is a show, in fact, today you absolutely don't want to miss. We're covering lots of pertinent topics that affect you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Kentucky's Voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally, because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE. I stand with ICE. We stand with all of our law enforcement officers.
And of course, that's Vice President Vance telling it like it is, and just as the Iranian dissident was speaking in the last segment, folks, we're in a battle. I mean, we absolutely 100% are in a battle right now with regard to the truth. We know that traditional mainstream media, sadly, does not give us the truth. It reports what it wants you to hear, and that's why programming like Kentucky's Voice is so critically important. I'm not saying we always get it 100% right, but I will promise you this. I know the hearts of each and every person that's involved with this project. We are here to bring out the truth and not distort it in any way, possible. I am joined today by my guest, the headliner for our show, the Tom and Bob Show here on Kentucky's Voice, Tom Fawbush. And
what's going on?
Tom, I know you have a lot of thoughts about this and what's going on right now, but it's just absolutely disgusting, and it's insanity, that this stuff is being allowed to propagate itself.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and at the end of the day, this lady was a professional agitator.
Yes.
She was an urban guerrilla. She was a quasi-terrorist, and she was also a mom. She's also an American citizen. She's also probably a wonderful lady to her friends. So that's why it's so tragic. This whole left-wing spirit that's sort of taken over the minds of so many people in this country, especially liberal white women. Let me just say this.
Yeah.
Something about this liberal white women thing right now is just kind of crazy, and it's like, and I tell you what it is, Bob, you and I are I'll just go there. You and I are very spiritual people. We understand there's a spiritual dynamic to the world. We've been very secularized as a country. Women specifically, for some reason, have been very secular in the past 20, 30 years. They're off the chain in so many ways. But at the end of the day, when you give up your old religion, it's not like you have no religion. You just replace it with a new religion. So the new religion for most, well, not most, it's just a lot of liberal white women is this wokeism stuff, because it gives them some sort of, some sort of virtue, sense some sense of meaning, and there's something to be said here about the fact that this lady was, she was a widow, and then she ended up in a lesbian relationship, and I don't know what it is, but if you just look at every story over the past 2 or 3 years, there's some sort of LGBT angle to the perpetrator, and so
That's right.
So you could say, okay, well, maybe once you buy into that worldview and you're all in, spiritually, I think you're still a bit unease about that lifestyle, because there's something inherently wrong with it, and it's you're not necessarily happy, so you blame the world around you, and you blame the Republican, you blame Trump, you blame so you buy into this whole left wing worldview, and you're agitated because of this lifestyle you're in, and it acts, and people act out, and it's just. I don't know how else you explain it. I mean, unless you just want to totally just write off the whole, spiritual sort of dynamic to American culture. Outside of that, I don't know how you explain this stuff, because, I mean, of course, the trans shooters, all this stuff, and now we've got this.
Well, and here's the problem, Tom, and I think most of our listeners would agree. It's brainwashing, that's happening, because they keep hearing the lie over and over and over again, and they start accepting it as fact. And
that's right.
I know the New York Post has really done some phenomenal reporting with regard to this woman, and in fact, if you all get a chance, I would strongly recommend that you go to the New York Post and look up, what they had to say about her, and everything that you were talking about, Tom, is 100% with regard to her background. She and her partner had moved to Canada not long after Trump got elected president, because, like a lot of people, that's what they were being told to do. You need to flee and get out of the country.
Yeah.
Rosie O'Donnell and some other ones, extreme leftist actors have done that. Apparently they didn't like it up there, so they came back and apparently moved into the Minnesota area. And what got me was, in fact, I'll read this to you from the New York Post article. Just as many others did in the lefty enclave, Good, that was the lady who died, sent her son to Southside Family Charter School, a K-5 academy opened in 1972 that from its inception has been, now listen to this, people, listen to this, has been unabashedly dedicated to social justice education, i.e. brainwashing.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And they say that. They're right up front about that.
Yeah.
And it was through her involvement in the school community that Good became involved in ICE Watch, a loose coalition of activists dedicated to disrupting ICE raids in that sanctuary city. And of course, sadly, it's not just in Minneapolis. This stuff is going in all over our country, in blue cities, in which they're literally getting in and putting themselves between law enforcement, just doing their job. Let me add that they're not doing anything wrong. They're trying to enforce the law and get people out of our country that have come here illegally. It just blows my mind, Tom. It absolutely blows my mind.
Can I play this clip real quick of a lady who was describing exactly what you're saying? She was a compatriot of Miss Good, and she was describing what she was doing that day. So it's about a 10-second clip. Mr. Producer, if we can go to this.
They clearly wanted her out of there because she was the main car leading the protest, is my understanding. I talked to another guy who was driving behind her, but she was very successful in blocking traffic. She was doing what she was set out to do, and so they wanted to get her the hell out of there. Yeah.
So it looked like she was impeding ICE vehicles.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
That was her goal. They clearly wanted her.
There we go. So that was her goal. So she was doing that all day long. That she was trained to do this. That was her mission.
Yeah.
And so ICE finally just said, okay, we're going to arrest you. You're intervening with law enforcement. You're impeding law enforcement. Get out of the car. We're going to arrest you. And then she decides to be belligerent and take off. And maybe she felt, well, I'm privileged enough. No one's going to touch me. I'm a white woman. I'm gonna, I've never been arrested before, and all this. Look at these people with masks on. Who are they? And she just since tragically she gets shot. And that's her own doing, because she put herself in that situation repeatedly throughout that day.
Yeah.
And then so anyway, it's just tragic, but it's just. Yeah, and it's the left. It's this far left movement that needs to be confronted and called out. And people that are buying into this stuff, you need to roll it back. And Bob, I don't know how culturally we can unwind this. I'm trying to figure, because that side is just so, they're in this fantasy world. They're in this sort of Marvel Comics kind of, we're all heroes. I mean, I saw this last night. There was 1,000 people in Louisville last night marching in front of WDRB protesting this shooting here in Louisville. I'll play the clip here in a minute. And so,
I wish I could say I'm surprised, but we're unfortunately, maybe not to the extent of Minneapolis, but we are living in a liberal city too.
Yes, right.
Listen, I know we're about out of time on this segment, and I do want to take a deeper dive into this. In fact, coming up next, I've got a really phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal clip that I want to play for our listeners. We are going to widen the lens a bit, and we're going to hear from former British Prime Minister Liz Truss, who warns that the modern left isn't just reshaping policies or politics, it's actively trying to dismantle Western civilization itself. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to the Tom and Bob Show here on Kentucky's Voice. We're so glad to have you joining us today. Again, we've already gotten in several texts from our text line. And if you want to join that discussion, you can do so by texting us at 502-571-0970. Again, that text line number is 502-571-0970. I just got to say this. What's going on right now is not just an American issue. I know across the globe, leaders are sounding the alarm about the radical left's influence on culture, economics, and really national identity. We see lots of countries, thank God, that are pushing back against it. In fact, former British Prime Minister Liz Truss, who I think holds the record for, I think she only served 50 days as Prime Minister of Great Britain, but in that short period of time, she had enough. She saw what was going on. But she recently spoke out about the modern left and how it is actively working to undermine the foundations of Western civilization. I have a clip from her. Let's play that.
You just can't win. And this is what Donald Trump understands, perhaps uniquely in the Western world. I think there are others who have taken on the deep state. You might point to Viktor Orban, you might point to Bukele or Milei, but really Donald Trump to me is the playbook of how you need to behave, because a lot of people in politics think because it was the case, in the 70s, 80s, that you could reason with the opposition, you could find a compromise, you could be bipartisan, you could persuade people, you could sell it in the media, you could roll the pitch, that strategy can be adopted now. And I think they're wrong, because the opposition have changed. We're not dealing with a load of social democrats who just want to raise taxes a bit and spend more on public spending. We're dealing with people who want to destroy Western civilization. This is what their aims are.
Amen.
And of course, again, that was Liz Truss, former Prime Minister of Great Britain, sounding off, about what's going on. I know, Tom, you and I have discussed this frequently. I know we talked about it a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
That it really is now a battle for modern civilization, and I'm not talking just about conservatism. I'm just talking about doing things the right way, normal,
Right.
just systems that America was always known for. We there was a time, you could be a Democrat and you could be a Republican and have your disagreements, but you could have good civil discussion
Right.
and discourse. And guess what? You didn't have to worry about somebody literally physically attacking you or trying to kill you, as we saw with Charlie Kirk, for your beliefs, and of course we know that they tried to do that to President Trump, and it was by the grace of God, that his life wasn't ended just before the election in a field in Butler, Pennsylvania.
That's right.
What can we do, Tom? This is a warning. I mean, this is an absolute warning. I don't think I'm overstepping and being too hyper vigilant about this, but we as a people, we have got to do something with regard, and I think at the very least right now, certainly stand behind President Trump and those who are trying to stand up for truth, justice, and the American way. Yeah, I'll borrow something from Superman because that's what's needed right now.
There we go. No, exactly right. And I want to answer that question. I want to read this text that came in because it kind of leads me into my next thought. We had a text from a caller that says, pluralism and multiculturalism were taught for the past 45 years. CRT, DEI, and these other Marxist ideas would not be so prevalent if we thought in categories, and conservatives have gone more Kirk Buchanan rather than Buckley and Rand Paul and Paul Ryan types. And so
Yep.
yeah, and so he's spot on. Basically, we're seeing a sort of the end result of this, of the counterculture, of the cultural revolution that occurred in the 60s, the young, the boom, the leftist baby boomers that broke away from the American consensus and way of thinking, and now they have matured and marched to the institutions, and the institutions have now gone far left, and so and you have two different tribes in the country, two different tribes with two different existential religious worldviews, and so
Yes.
and so you have two broadly different cultures now. You have traditional American culture, was based in Judeo-Christian, American traditional freedom, liberty culture, and then you have the more Marxist left wing, secular. But really, secular is not a really true. There is no secular. You're always going to have a religion. Your religion is now Marxism and wokeism, and so
Yeah,
so
that honestly, that really is their religion.
it is. It absolutely
Is Marxism and communism. That's their religion.
Well, it's like the lady that got shot here. She sent her kids to a social justice school. So it's just like you and I would send our kids to a Christian school. So it's they're going to those kids get indoctrinated to that worldview, and the LGBT pride flag worldview. And so we're at a point where since we no longer have a consensus as a culture, we no longer have a certain amount of respect for sort of the Judeo-Christian, traditional Christian nationalism's, sort of approach to living in this country, then we can no longer compromise because these are diametrically opposed ways of thinking. And so now we're at a point where it's just somebody's going to have to win and somebody's going to have to lose. And of course, we've talked about this before. There's a great book written on cyclical conflict that America goes through every 80 to 100 years called The Fourth Turning. I'm a big believer of that. It's so true. It's written back in the 90s, predicted everything we're going through. Basically says every 80 to 100 years, America goes into some sort of crisis where it has to reinvent itself. And usually halfway through that 80-year period, there starts some sort of cultural conflict that sort of plays itself out at the end of that 80-year period. And it's because what happens is the people that remember the lessons of the previous crisis 80 years ago, they basically have passed on. And that cultural crisis that has developed in that interim period comes to a head. The American Revolution, good example. Before that, you can go historically. There's the War of Spanish Succession was a big deal. It's kind of weird. It's deep history stuff. But anyway, see, we're good to the Revolution. 80 years later, we have the Civil War. 80 years later, we have the Great Depression and World War II. 80 years from that is now. right now. And so that book was written saying, written in 1997. They said basically what you're going to see in the 2020s is America is going to start fracturing, and it's going to have all these. It's going to have a financial crisis. Even predicted a pandemic. Even predicted states coming down, starting to rebel against the federal government. All this stuff. And so I'm not saying it's exactly right, but it sure rings true. And so the point of that is, in that crisis, and historically through those crises, America has always had this conflict that had to be resolved. And once it was resolved, we could then go on with a new consensus, and it was a kind of a golden age for the next generation or two. But until we resolve this problem, it's going to be tough. And the last point I'll leave with that, the book says that there's going to come to a moment where it feels like all is lost and we're about to lose the country. And that's what really shakes everybody out of their stupor. And we all get real focused on the problem. And we say, okay, we cannot do this. We all agree now, we cannot do this. So let's all change together and move the right direction. And I think we're coming to that point. And because Tim Walz today is saying he's going to mobilize the National Guard against ICE.
Yeah.
What does that sound like, folks? That sounds like
stuff.
Fort Sumter type stuff. This is,
yes.
It's come on. And so anyway, there's my rant.
Well, listen, I'll put it this way. The world has seen this movie before. As you said, history does repeat itself.
Yeah.
In fact, when we return, we'll hear from Steve Bannon, who says there's a war happening right now inside America. We know this, and it's one that we must win. And I'll underline that word, must win. More straight ahead here on Kentucky's Voice. We'd love to have you join us at 502-571-0970. We'll see you right after this break. Stay tuned.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice, the Tom and Bob Show. Again, we're so glad that you joined us. As I said, going into the break, we'd love to have your comments. We've already gotten several today. You can text us at 502-571-0970 if you'd like to join this very critically important discussion. Political strategist Steve Bannon says what we're experiencing isn't just division. It's an all-out war for the future of this country. According to Mr. Bannon, this fight is happening in our institutions, our culture, and our communities, and losing is not an option. Please play clip 4.
As I've said time and time again, the war's at home. We got to win. This war, we got to win. Other wars, important to win, but not actually must wins. Must win is in the United States of America. And right there from Minneapolis, and let's be blunt, Walz, the governor, who's not going to run again, right? We're not going to run again because we have criminal charges brought against him. He's talking about bringing in the National Guard of Minnesota against ICE and against federal officials. You talk about a civil war, you talk about an insurrectionist and that mayor. I put up on Getter yesterday, and one of the left-wing sites picked it up. I said, go in and arrest the mayor. They should have done that yesterday. His throwdown right there, F ICE, and instigating more violence against ICE agents. Come on, man. Go arrest that punk. He's the railhead of a lot of the problems, and Walz.
And that was Steve Bannon, who's never afraid to speak his mind, and he's usually correct with what he has to say. And Tom, I believe that we as a nation are finding ourselves at a critical juncture, with regard to what is happening right now. We know that President Trump has really taken the lead and done some really remarkable things, with the action that he did in Venezuela with our brave military that went in there and captured a wanted narco terrorist who was, and I might add this real quick, he was the illegitimate, let me underline that word, illegitimate president of that nation. They had an election in 2024. Maduro was soundly beaten. And guess what? He said, I'm not paying any attention to the results of this election. And too bad. What are you going to do about it?
That's right.
You know, very arrogantly, what are you going to do about it? And again, you see a lot on the left media, and I have to chuckle. I do when I see people spouting about, you know, America went in and illegally, you know, took out the duly elected president of another nation. Well, none of that's true.
Right.
You know, it's all a lie, LIE.
Yeah.
And
Exactly
so,
right.
you know, now Trump has done that. We're starting to see some cascading things going on. We know that a large number of military assets have now been moved over to the Middle East. We opened up the show talking a little bit about, you know, what's going on in Iran. We know that regime has been totally 100% propped up by Russia and China. And they have been the leading terrorists of the world for the last 40 or so years. So now and Trump has warned them, said, you do anything, because they have tried before. They, being the Iranian people, have tried to overthrow this tyrant, you know, the Ayatollah, and get him out of there. They've tried it, and it's always been met with severe repercussions that usually resulted in imprisonment and or hanging. You know, as a possibility. But now seeing lots and lots of videos that towns are crumbling. Even the police now in those towns are going along with the Iranians. People that are actually Iranians are thanking America, and specifically President Trump, for these actions that he's taken. And that's the thing, clip I was going to play earlier that I just decided not to because it was one voice. But he's a former Iranian. Well, I guess once an Iranian, always an Iranian. But he's a dissident, and he's saying this very thing, that the Ayatollah has fled to Russia, and that regime is crumbling. So that remains to be seen. Nothing official yet, but again, most media sources that are true media sources and are actually reporting the facts, and there aren't that many. Are saying that they feel that regime is on the verge of crumbling down. And boy, Tom, won't that be a breath of fresh air? If the Iranian terroristic regime is removed from power? I mean, that's going to solve a lot of problems in itself if that happens.
Right. Yeah, it really heals the Middle East on a lot of levels. I mean, they're the primary antagonists right now. You know, paying all these proxy terrorist groups to attack us and our allies, and so it's just wonderful, you know. And just in the Maduro thing and Iran they're really connected. I mean, you know, Iran of course was a sponsor of Venezuela, and just the way we took out Maduro sent a real lesson to the rest of the world that are buying Russian weapons, that are buying Chinese weapons, that, hey, they don't work with America, and so don't mess around. We'll just blow right through those things, and we'll come capture your rear end, and we'll take you back to the U.S. and put you on trial. So that's kind of shaking a lot of these dictators up around the world. Say, well, they're not playing anymore. Trump's not playing. He's a bit crazy. You know, Trump's a bit crazy, and we better start behaving. And that's what we need. We need somebody that's unpredictable and somebody that they can actually respect. And in Iran, I think what's going to happen here the next really 24, 48 hours is the real critical moment here. Because, you know, this revolt, this revolution, these protests have been going on for about a week. The Iranian government just finally shut down the internet yesterday.
Yeah,
and
big surprise.
Yeah, big surprise. And that's typically what happens, because we've had about a dozen of these protests over the past 20 years. And that's the pattern is they build up, and then the government will shut down the internet, and then they'll do the crackdown. Then they go in and just start shooting up everybody on the streets and just spraying and praying and killing every protester and telling them to go home. That's probably happening right now as we're speaking. And now the question is there enough hard power now that the protesters and the revolutionaries have gathered to respond and push back on that? And I hope so. I hope I've seen reports of some defections in the military there, you know, because you know, it just like in say Nazi Germany, you had the army, you had the Wehrmacht, and then you also had the SS, right? And so the SS were the loyal political soldiers that protected Hitler, right? And so And there's points in actually in World War II where the SS and the Army were at odds. They would even fight, especially at the end of the war. So what you have in Iran is you have the IRGC, which is like their SS, which is the sort of the loyal political militia, loyal to the Ayatollah. But then you also have the Iranian army. And so they're a little bit more representative of the people because they just draft people from the population. They're not as ideological. So my hope is the Iranian army, who has all the big guns, so they could switch and say, we're done. I don't care if you have the IRGC. We've got all the tanks. You got a few rifles. We got all the tanks.
And they could really shut this down relatively quick.
That's right.
If they decided to do that. And I think too, they're probably looking because how many times in the past has the United States talked big, but never when the rubber met the road, were willing to come and do what it took to back up. And I think now that's what they may be seeing with regard to what Trump did down in Venezuela, and now moving forward, and the fact he absolutely has singled out Iran as being another area that he has his eyes on very closely.
Yeah, and drew a line in the sand and said, if you attack protesters, we're getting involved. And so we're functionally involved in this now. We've kind of thrown that gauntlet down. And so now is the critical moment with the internet being out. Elon Musk has turned on Starlink or kept it on, I guess, in Iran. So there is still internet access to the world through Starlink. Thank God for Elon Musk, the man. He should get a medal for the decade of saving the world. I mean, on so many levels, it's just really an interesting man. But pray for the Iranians. There's a lot of good folks, and actually, a real Iranian will call themselves a Persian. They prefer Persian,
that's right.
because that's their historical name. And it is a great culture in a lot of ways. It's just that evil Islamic spirit took it over 50 years ago, but it was so oppressive, it's so tyrannical that the average Iranian hates Islam. All the mosques are shutting down. Christianity is blowing up in Iran.
I'm glad you brought that up,
because
that's
underground
absolutely
church
happening right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Even Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion, is making a comeback. Islam is it's now just a sect of these hardcore radicals that surround the Ayatollah, and the rest of the country is probably not so warmed up to it. So it's a fascinating moment, and we just need to support it, and it needs to happen.
And Tom, this is a moment because we're Christians. We all need to be joined together in praying. If you haven't been, and I'm talking to folks in our audience, be sure today, say a prayer for the folks in Venezuela. And here, I've got friends, good friends from Venezuela. I got good friends from Iran, and these are good people. And my friends also happen to be Christians, as well. And I know for them, this is a time of rejoicing, as to what's going on. But simultaneously, there's a lot of fear and concern, as to what's happening. Any final thoughts? We have about a minute to go in this segment.
Yeah, I just hope it happens. And also, what's interesting is the geopolitical, chessboard is changing so dramatically. I mean, 5 months ago or 30 days ago, Russia and China had a base in our hemisphere. That they no longer have that now. Greenland looks like we're going to, somehow do something with Greenland. So that's, we're going to take that away from the Europeans. Iran, which has been Russia's primary ally in the Middle East, they're out of the picture. So it's our adversaries are on notice, and Trump's, and America is doing the right thing right now. We just need to support it.
Amen. And in fact, the battlefield may not look traditional, but it is a battlefield. We'll be up next. We'll bring it back to the media itself with the Media Research Center senior editor Liz Hughes, and then connect to a very powerful local angle right here in Louisville. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss the next segment.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us, speak up, Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to our final segment of Kentucky's Voice, the Tom and Bob Show. Again, you can still get a comment in. We've gotten several today, 502-571-0970. If you'd like to add something to our discussion. This is going to be a great segment, final segment to wrap it all up with. We are going to tie in some local things with it. The media just doesn't report the news. It shapes how people think about the country that they live in. Liz Hughes, senior editor at the Media Research Center out of Washington, she calls out the leftist narratives that are actively undermining America. After that, and I'm going to play a clip with regard to that. After that, Tom will play a clip from WDRB, maybe even a couple, featuring the Louisville police chief who says the Minneapolis shooting could have been prevented. Okay, I wonder what direction he's going to run in. But regardless, I'd like to play the Liz Hughes clip. Please play clip 5.
So I just want to get this straight here. Laken Riley was attacked and assaulted and beaten to death so badly that her skull was caved in and she wasn't even recognizable. Jocelyn Nungare was 12 years old when she was raped and strangled to death under a bridge. Rachel Morin was also a 37-year-old mom when she was attacked and raped and beaten to death and left beside a jogging trail. All by illegal aliens who shouldn't have even been in this country in the first place. And there were no protests for them. The left didn't care. The media didn't care. Yeah. Democrats wouldn't even stand up in Congress for their names. But y'all will gather by the thousands and stomp through the streets after a woman was shot by ICE after it looks like she hit one of them with her car. Look, I don't want to see a woman dead in her car, but she's dead because she was out in the street in a city she didn't even live in, LARPing like she was the hero in Schindler's List. Yeah. This is not a video game. You're not playing Call of Duty and killing Nazis. Illegal immigration has an actual effect on this country. Consequences on crime, on housing, on our job market, on our economy, and on our highway safety. It is not your stage on which to play hero just because you're a first world white woman with nothing better to do with your time who wants to feel so desperately like you're a part of something. Immigration officers are not the bad guys. The bad guys are the drug dealers and the human traffickers and the criminals who rape children and women and leave them dead beside hiking trails. And if liberals had any sense whatsoever, that's what they would be upset about.
Amen.
And boy, Liz Hughes bringing it.
Nailed it.
And I know, Tom, you would be very pleased with that. That's something you talk about often. Yeah.
LARPing.
It's absolutely incredible. What are your thoughts about what she just said?
She's just spot on. It's all these folks that feel like they've watched too many Marvel movies, right? And they think they're trying to save the world, and there's Nazis that have taken over, and they've got to stand up and fight and all this. And just go home. Go home and watch your Marvel movie. This is not. These are law enforcement agents that are enforcing righteous moral laws that the country has passed and have instituted. And immigration law is just. And now it'd be different if it was, say, we're in the South in the 1950s and there's segregated lunchrooms.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's an immoral law that you should protest and you should stand up and fight. For example, or if somebody passed a law that said, Bob, we're going to come to your house and take your guns today. That's an immoral law, and you should fight that. And so there's times where you do get violent, and you get. I mean, that's why we have the Second Amendment. I mean, we're Americans here. Let's get real about it. But this is immigration law is a righteous law, and because you got to have law and order, you've got to be able to control your borders, especially what they're doing right now, which is they're arresting the criminals, the criminal aliens. The people that are actually the drug dealers and all these murderers and stuff. So
rapists, pedophiles, the list goes on and on.
Exactly right. And so anyway, that she's spot on. We've got this hero complex because, like I said, people are searching for meaning. Their hearts are empty. We have this secular culture that has forgotten our religious roots, and so they fill the vacuum with this new alternative Marxist religion, and that gives them some sort of meaning and purpose. And of course, the call to action there is, you've got to go out and fight the evildoers, fight the sinners, fight the unjust, and so anyway.
And Tom, how much has this been funded We know that there's literally billionaires from around leftist billionaires from around the world, and they're going after them now. I think finally, and calling them out and going to do something about it. But that are underwriting all of this, and also how much of our NGO money that has been funded by the American taxpayer, unbeknownst to us, that has gone back into these because this isn't just happening poof out of thin air.
That's right.
It takes money and lots of money to fund something like this.
That's right. Yeah. The question is this organic protest or is this astroturf protest, ginned up by NGOs? And there's an interesting moment here. When the Trump administration came in again the second time, they shut down a lot of these NGOs. And all this pipeline of money, of government money, going into these far left NGOs that are funding all these protests and riots. And so there was a moment there where conservatives said, "Well, maybe all this stuff goes away, all this BLM stuff, maybe all this." So yeah, I think you've seen less of it, but there's still a strong contingent of people that are just true believers that whether they're paid or not, they're going to show up and do it because they're just empty and they just need this fight for meaning and purpose in life. So,
in fact, we just got a text in. The texter says it's Chief Humphrey running cover for Mayor Greenberg. I know we have a couple clips. I don't know if we have time to
play it. Yeah,
both in, but let's go ahead and play at least one. So
here's Chief. Oops.
Don't put yourself in a bad position. That's why we have policy surrounding shooting at people inside of vehicles. It seems like it was something that, based on tactics, could have been easily preventable. And it's an absolute tragedy what's going on up there.
Everybody, if they have concerns.
In July, Mayor Greenberg ended Louisville sanctuary city policies under pressure from the White House. Greenberg defended that change, saying it avoided large-scale ICE raids here in Louisville. While LMPD says it does not aid ICE, the department recently disciplined 3 officers after a password for the city's flock camera surveillance system was turned over to federal agents and used for immigration enforcement.
We'll stop there. So basically, the chief was saying that the police officer, the ICE agent, probably put himself in a bad position, and so he's blaming the officer. He's blaming tactics on the officer. Well, I could show you clip after clip of officers in similar situations where they get run over. And this guy was he got out of his vehicle, started walking in front of that car, and that before he had a chance, this lady was already accelerating and coming at him. And this same officer, J.D. Vance mentioned this earlier, the same officer was hit by someone else earlier, about 6 months ago, in performing his duties. And there have been 100 instances of ICE agents being attacked by vehicles in the past few months. This is not just an isolated event. To your point earlier, there is a anti-ICE movement, and they have tactics. This lady was operating under a tactical model of, we're going to go block their access to place. We're going to stop them in traffic. She was doing this all day long. So I'm sorry, Chief, wrong. When you have a lady that's using her vehicle as a weapon to impede, then you got to block that vehicle, and you got to get that lady and take her out. So not take her out physically, you take her out of the vehicle and arrest her. But if she's going to run and run you over,
I think that's exactly what they were trying to do. That was the attempt that was being made. And again, it's just a sad, unfortunate situation that should never have happened, but it was completely on the back of the protesters as far as crossing that line. It's okay to protest in this nation, but it needs to be done in an orderly fashion, and not certainly risking the lives of the ICE officers who are trying to enforce the law, as well as for that matter, the people that are being arrested. We know down in Texas recently, there was a shooting down there that actually killed an illegal immigrant that was in ICE detention, and it was some crazy man that was just decided he was going to start spraying bullets down there, trying to take out ICE officers. And he ended up killing the illegal immigrant.
Exactly.
So it's just a bizarre time we find ourselves in. And let me ask you real quick. I know we only have about 3 minutes to go, Tom, but What are your feelings about, something being done about Mayor Jacob Fry in Minneapolis for making his incendiary statements?
Yeah.
As well as obviously Tim Walz, who I do feel at the end of the day is going to face criminal charges.
Yeah, he should.
Because we know at least $9 billion of taxpayer money. And there's just more and more investigations that are now happening, and not just federal, even in the state of Minnesota is doing them. What should happen, to these fraudsters and these people that are trying to fan the flames of discontent?
Yeah. Well, like Steve Bannon said, I think we should arrest that mayor. But when you look back at what I was saying earlier, that we're in this existential moment between these two tribes in this country, it doesn't surprise me to see one side or the other going to the mat because they feel like we got to go for broke. It's existential. That means we are going to, if we lose, we're gone as a movement and we lose our country in the way they vision their country. And so it doesn't surprise me to see Tim Walz say, well, you know what? I'm going to be, first of all, I'm going to be arrested here by the Trump administration because they're going to got me for fraud. So I might as well just throw it all in and just break out the National Guard and let's start a fight. And so it doesn't surprise me because the left has been very neo-Confederate over the past decade or so. And Victor Davis Hanson uses that term a lot. Basically, it's saying that the left is using sanctuary cities and sort of nullification of federal law, using local jurisdictions to fight against the federal government. And so, you're at that moment in this country where you have two tribes that can't get along and it's existential. They're going to run those plays. And so Walz is running that play today. He's like, well, I'm going to get the National Guard and we're going to kick ICE out of this city. What does that look like? That is a war. That is basically saying.
And he's doing that knowing the federal government has jurisdiction.
That's right. Exactly right. He would lose that.
He knows that. And so he's absolutely being inflammatory in doing that. In fact, a final quick comment. We're about done with the show, but our texter said Humphrey, the police chief in Louisville, should have explained LMPD policy with regard to it.
Yeah.
I think because I have several friends that have served on the LMPD. They're pretty much hands off, sadly, situations. And that was the problem up in Minnesota. There was no local law enforcement there whatsoever while this craziness was going on to back up the ICE agents. So anyway, great show today. It's always a pleasure to join you, my friend. We've covered a lot of ground from Iran to Minneapolis, from London to Louisville, but the common thread is clear: truth versus the narrative. Thanks for listening. Thanks for standing firm. And thanks for being a voice for values that still matter.
Pray for Iran.
Next time, God bless you and God bless Kentucky.